All right, looks like it's time to get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Amanda. I'm the technical writer here at Canary Systems. I'm going to talk to you today about the latest release of MLSuite 2018. I'm joined today by Martin and Sarah from our marketing team, Dave from our support team, and Alexi from our software development team. Now, before I get started, I do want to just let you know we're going to run through everything, and then at the end, we'll answer everyone's questions. There should be a button on your screen that says Q&A or questions and answers. You can go ahead and start sending your questions as soon as you'd like. Sarah's going to keep track of them, and then at the end, we'll go back through and answer them all for you. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to talk today about is data types. Now, up until now, all data has been imported and processed and handled in our system as a float type. But now, with the release of SP5, we can actually import and handle data of a bunch of different types. It doesn't have to just be float. So if we're creating a new element here, on the right side panel, you'll notice there's this drop-down field, value type. There's still float in here. It's going to be the default value. But we also have a number of other options. And what I'm going to do is kind of walk through each of them and give a scenario of why this might be useful. The first option I'm going to talk about is string. Now, for a couple of the examples that I'm going to give, I'm going to reference this lake. So here locally, there's a lake in the area that we monitor. We collect different data like lake level, water pressure, lots of different weather data. So I'm going to refer back to this in some of my examples. For this particular one, I'm going to say, so we have, like I said, we measure weather data, or we collect weather data from this lake. So we're getting things like wind speed, rain, wind direction, but there might be some other information that would be useful to somebody, like human observation or just observation. So we've created a data element to go along with this weather station called observations using a string data type. And now we can actually capture specific information. So for example, on January 10th, it was sunny and warm and all the snow melted. That might make the water level higher. On January 11th, we had really heavy rain. Again, that might affect the water level. On January 13th, it was cloudy and there was freezing rain. Another option we have here is date time. Now that's just what it sounds like. It is a date and a time. Another example that I'm going to use, or another instrument I guess I'm going to reference a few times for examples is, so we have some data that was collected for a bunch of different prisms from a specific robot. So for this particular example, I'm going to talk about date time. I'm going to say that you might have prisms that are close to somewhere there's blasting going on. So that's probably going to be really helpful to know if that prism was in a blast area or within a blast radius. Because if you're looking at the data for that prism and there's suddenly a lot of movement and there was a blast in that area, that's going to be meaningful. So you can capture, or you can have an element that captured specific date and time when a blast near this instrument occurred. Our next option is Boolean. Boolean is simply a true or false value. So for this lake that I mentioned, again, so because we are in New Hampshire, it's winter. Something that might be helpful for people who are looking at this data is to know, is this lake frozen or not? So we're going through the months, they're taking readings, it's probably not frozen. Take another reading, also not frozen. So we'll leave the box unchecked to indicate false. Then we come to a date and we'll call it December 30th. Now somebody checks and the lake is actually frozen. So we'll go ahead and mark that as true. And then they continue taking readings and likely it's still going to be frozen for a while. Now you'll notice here, I can no longer change this drop down here. That's because data sets have been added. So in order to be able to edit my drop down again, I will need to remove these. One more. All right, the next data type or value type is blob. Blob is a really cool one. It's just a binary large object, and there are a number of different files that can be imported into this blob data type. You simply create a record, hit the upload button, and then you can pick from all sorts of file types. You can do PDFs, you can do PowerPoints, you could do Word documents, you can do images. So going back to the prism and the robot example that I mentioned, so you might have this data element here. I just named it prism, but it has pictures in it. So the robot, every time it's going around and taking readings, it can also take a picture. And that might be something really meaningful that you want to store. So you have all your images with your different timestamps. Clearly, I uploaded them all at the same time. With images, though, you can go ahead and download them at a later time. You can also preview them. Not all blob types can be previewed, however, images can. And there's our prism that the robot might have taken a picture of. Another value type or data type that we've added is enumeration. Enumeration is just a list, like a drop down. So this, when you select enumeration, you also get this items box here in which you can enter the different values you want available in your drop down. I create a new data set and I can select from the drop down and it includes whatever I put in the items list. Now, an instance where this might be helpful is if you had a weather station, probably not the one on the lake, but a mobile weather station somewhere. If it's moving around to different areas, it might be useful to know what area that weather station is when it collected specific data. So I've created a data element called zone, and you can select, say there's 8 zones. So in my item list here, I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, each time this weather station collects data, we can also track which zone it was in from the drop-down list. And there is one more value type. Oh yes, integer. So it's just an integer, no decimals, just a plain old numeric value. Now, along with the different data types, another really large enhancement that we've made with SP5 is the addition of custom properties. Now, if you're familiar with MLWeb, then you're already familiar with data elements that we've been looking at. Custom properties are essentially data elements, just with data that's captured probably a little less frequently. So where data elements, you might have a reading every single day, every hour, maybe every minute. With properties, it's probably going to be a lot less frequent. It might be a property might be a serial number, so you would just capture it one time. It might be a calibration data sheet, so you're going to go through and calibrate your instrument once a year. And just like data elements, properties can have any different type of value. So this one, well, verification QA form. Probably not something that we're going to get on a daily basis every time we take a piezometer reading. So properties are likely to have data captured a lot less frequently than elements. Another great thing about properties is when you use them in charts, we have the ability to not need to have an exact timestamp to use that property. So you'll see here there's this field, absolute timestamp, and it's currently set to no. This means that when the calculation runs, it's going to look for the latest, most recent value that's near that, whatever we're calculating. Property values remain relevant. So if you're using it in a calculation, you don't need an exact timestamp for that property to work like you would with a data element. Now this can be turned on and off. So if you turn absolute timestamp to yes, then when you use this in a calculation, you would need the exact timestamp to match. You say no, then whatever the last most recent value in relation to the date being used in the calculation is, will be used. Now, when doing data imports, there are a few new fields that relate to data types and properties specifically. If you'll notice here in the data grid, there's new fields: type, subtype, metadata, is property, and recorded threshold. I'm going to walk through each of these and tell you a little bit about what they're used for. So type is the same thing that we've just gone through. It's the different data types that can be imported. So you can select for each individual element or property what the type is. This subtype field is used when the type that's selected is blob to indicate which file type it is. Metadata is used for enumeration. This is going to let you know what values should be in that drop down. Now this column here is property. It's just what it says. Is this thing that you're importing a property? This particular option is checked. You can also tell that this is a property based on the naming convention of the field. So the ones above it say SP5B, that's the instrument. And then that's followed by this hashtag, which indicates these are elements. So piezo, elevation, both elements. However, this field has SP5B, the instrument, followed by a period, which indicates that this is actually a property. So you see floodgate open. Now for this particular file that we're importing here, this is for a dam. The piezometer is taking different readings. Whether the floodgate is open or not may affect the readings that you're seeing. So this is a property. And we only want to capture information when something is changed. So we would use it as a property because there's not going to be unique data every timestamp. Now this last column here, recorded threshold, this is specific to property. This recorded threshold field also relates to what we were just talking about with the properties. Let me open a property window again. So here, this absolute timestamp, yes and no, and then this recorded threshold. These two relate to one another. When we're importing a brand new file that has both data elements and properties, you're probably going to have readings that are pretty frequent because there's elements. But for the property, you may not want to import a value for every single timestamp, as the value might only change periodically. When this recorded threshold is set to 0, that indicates that you're going to import every single property value. So let's see here. I've already imported this data so that we can see what it looks like. Okay, so you see here, there's a timestamp for every hour. So we've imported a value for this property every single hour. The first 3 hours it was 1, then for a number of hours it was 0, and then for a number of hours it went back to 1. So these are very redundant. And since when using this property in a calculation, we can use the latest timestamp. These extra ones aren't needed. They're just taking up room in the database. So if we want to not import all of this data, you can set this recorded threshold to -1. And what this will do, it'll import only the unique values. So you see here, this is the exact same file that was imported. However, this one was set to record. The recorded threshold was set to 0, so it imported all records. And this one was set to -1. So it only imported when there was a new unique value. So at 12 a.m., the value was 1. And it didn't change till 3. So here, we didn't import another one until 3. And the next import was at 10, which is when this changed back to 1. So with properties, you can import data only when it changes, and this will save space in your database. Now, while we're looking at the import window, I want to go over a couple other things that aren't related to properties or data types, but are new with the release of SP5. The first one in this separator field, this dropdown, this indicates what the file delimiter for the file you're importing is. Semicolon here is a new option. You also, with scheduled imports, will notice that you're going to see the owner here. This is who created the file or who has made the latest update. This is important because with scheduled imports, only certain user types can actually create and modify scheduled imports. Another thing you'll notice here is this value flag. Now, I showed you this imported this data here, which has the instrument SP5B, which is outlined here, SP5B, 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 for the elements and the property. And then it has the actual elements and properties, piezo, elevation, floodgate, open. But it doesn't have anything for valid flag. What this valid flag does, if a file has a valid flag in it, showing whether a specific data set is valid or not, we can now include that information in the import by putting this valid flag in the name field. It needs to go at the front of the import. And then when you import the data, you'll notice that some records are valid and some are invalid. Valid, invalid. And this is dictated by what was in the file. Something else new with imports something else new relating to imports is we have a number of different file types that are automatically recognized that you don't need to do all this configuration for. We have 2 new file types that are now included in that, the Instantel full waveform and the Instantel full histogram. If either of these file types are imported, our system is going to automatically know where the data is supposed to be stored based on the header records. You'll see there are no configuration fields here, whereas in our other import, there's lots of information that needs to be configured because this is not a recognized file. Talking about new import types, we also have, not through MLWeb, but through ML Server, some other types of some other type of imports that are recognized. One is ground probe radar. This is new with the release of SP5. We also have, we can now include INSAR 3VG, which we've had for a while, but the new part is SQLite, and that's new with the release of SP5. While I'm over here, one other thing I want to touch on is with the MLSuite installer, we've now included a utility that will import for you a library of all different icons that can be used in the MLWeb to represent different instruments and other things that you'd want to see within a 2D or 3D window. Returning to MLWeb, there are a couple other things I want to touch on. Earlier, I mentioned that you can use properties in calculations, and I want to show you that quickly. Just like data elements, properties can be used in calculations. So let's create a new calculated element. Just like the data element, the property can be dragged into the formula editor. There's also a new feature called the auto suggest, and this allows you to say you don't necessarily know the name of the element or the property you want to include, but you know what the instrument is. So I want to include an element that belongs to a pedometer. So I'm going to start typing pedometer, do control space, and this is going to give me all the elements or the instruments or properties or calculated elements that have what I just typed in there. So PIEZ. And I want to select this instrument because I know the element or property I want to include belongs to it. So now if I want to include an element, I do the hashtag symbol like we did in the import, control space again, and this gives me a list that I can select from of all the available data elements. If we want to do a property, very similar. However, instead of doing the hashtag, we're going to do the period, just like we did on the import. Control space again, and this gives me the available properties that belong to that instrument. And now this can be included in a calculation. Something new in 3D windows. So we have our selection tool here. And this selects any element, instrument, or type of data to be displayed in a 3D chart. Now, this data here is all IBIS data. And then these are individual instruments. So in the IBIS data, I only want to select this very specific area that's a little bit discolored. This indicates there's some sort of movement here. I don't want to, however, include all this out here because it doesn't look like there's anything going on there. Now you'll notice that there's only one additional instrument included in my selection area. With the release of SP5, we can now select instruments outside of the selection area to be included in our 3D charts. Now, some of these instruments might have important information related to why there's movement here. So I've selected the selection area with the selection box, as well as some additional icons around it. I'm going to view my chart. Change my date range here and preview. Now you see I have my IBIS data for my selection tool, but also information from those other instruments that I selected. Also within 3D charts, you can now export or save the chart to a PDF. This is something we could do with other outputs, but this is new. This is new for 3D charts. Let's see, what else? So class configuration. If we're going to look at a class configuration, we've added the ability to import and export alarms. And this is really helpful if you have a lot of instruments with a lot of different alarms set and a lot of different alarm thresholds. Instead of updating each of them manually, you can now export the existing into an Excel or CVS file, make the changes that you need, and re-import it. This functions very much like the instruments currently. So you can download all the instrument and property details, make updates, and upload them. Now you can do the same for alarms. One other thing that I do want to cover is when you're looking at in a 2D window, in 2D windows, you have the ability to change the coordinate system, the base or window coordinate system, or you can change the configuration for the layer. Now, what's new here is we've always had this configuration field where you can make changes. However, we've now added this active configuration. This shows what's currently active for the window or the layer. When you make changes here and you save them, if those changes are recognized and valid, it'll update this active configuration field. However, if they're not, the active configuration will remain the same, and you can go back and see what you possibly did wrong and make changes to it. And I think, as I look around the room to see if anybody disagrees, I think that that covers everything. So Sarah, if you want to go ahead and take control, and we can start answering questions.
Thanks, Amanda. I'm just going to switch over to my screen real quick. All right, so we did get a couple of questions that came up during the webinar. So the first one that came up was what other types of data can be used in blobs? So I know you went over showing how we can add images and view those in MLWeb, but were there other types of data that can be used with the type of blob charts or data?
So for blob data types, you can use pretty much any file. You can import images, you can import PDFs, PowerPoints. There's only a few types that you can preview like I did with images. I think off the top of my head, it's just PDFs and images right now. But the other types you can still download.
All right. So the next one, this one's pretty interesting. So you went over recorded threshold for properties, and you said it had to be either 0 or -1 for the all data or unique values. Can you enter anything other than 0 or -1, or do they have to be those values?
In order to just get the unique values, it has to be -1. If you put another number in there, it's going to import everything.
All right. Okay, so this next one says, can valid flags be edited in MLWeb? So you talked about how when you can import data and you can edit those flags from that, I believe it was a CSV file.
Yep.
Can you edit those once they've been imported into MLWeb?
Yep, once the data is in MLWeb, you can open up the data window and set any data sets to either valid or invalid.
All right. So this next one, so you went over towards the very end about how do you, selecting extra instruments outside of the 3D area view. How do you add those extra instruments?
So if you want to select the instruments outside of the selection area, you would just click on you would hold Control and then left click with your mouse. And doing that again on the same instrument will deselect it. Okay. And let's see, we've got a couple more that are coming in, so let's just get through the next few. So on MLWeb, if you access MLWeb from your personal computer, can you also access that icon library that you mentioned? So when you do the installer, or when you install ML Server on your server, when you install MLSuite on your server, from your personal computer, you won't be able to access that library, but you can actually install or download the library directly to your computer. If you go to our website and you get the MLSuite installer, start the install, but deselect everything about the icon, everything except the icon option, you can install that library right on your personal machine.
All right. So we've got a couple more questions. So we have one, can Canary Windows save the layers that are being pulled from the WMS service? For instance, this client currently has a WMS service where they only use the 5th layer out of 20, and it doesn't always remember the 5th layer selection when the window is closed and defaults to the top layer. So can anyone take a guess at that answer?
Yeah, hi, this is Martin. So it should say this. This sounds, if anything, sounds like a bug. It should usually save the layer that you select as active. You have to remember to save your image window as well, and potentially save the layout. You can take a look at that.
Okay, and then you showed the instrument selection in the 3D window. Can the same selection method be used for a 2D window to display the charts for multiple instruments?
In 2D windows, you don't have the same selection methods. you have a 2D lasso which you can draw around an area of interest to query for instruments or icons inside the area. And then in addition to that, you can additionally select more icons. However, there's no charting based on that selection. So it's just a different method to select in 2D windows.
All right, and we've got one more. If there's any other questions, feel free to submit them in the next couple of minutes and we'll go over them. Otherwise, feel free to submit questions after the webinar and we can answer them individually as well. So this last one right now says, is Canary MLSuite able to monitor structural health monitoring sensors on bridges?
Yeah, the answer is yes, of course. MLSuite is created to be able to integrate a lot of different data sources, and that includes most of the structural health monitoring sensor types that are in use.
All right.
Great.
Well, that looks like that's all of the questions we have for now. Oh, one more. So are there any changes made to the inclinometer data module, i.e. importing or data processing?
Yes. This is not part of this service pack release. However, the next major release, which is coming in a few weeks, it's not a service pack, it's a major new version release. And that release has a different inclinometer and also seismic data processing as well as storage component. We'll release more information about that when we announce the next version.
All right.
Great.
Well, thank you very much to everyone who joined in for this webinar. I think we covered a lot of the basic features of the new update. Feel free to email us with any questions. Thank you, Amanda, for hosting it, and thank you, Martin and Dave, for sticking around for answering questions.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, and hope
Have
everyone has a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.